Hello, friends. I'm back to talk a little bit more about the whole AI doomer situation that I had a problem with in my first video. It was amazing that folks actually chimed in the comments and actually taught me some things that I should go and research, and I did. I watched the entire 4-hour interview with Eliezer Yudkowsky and Dwarkesh Patel in laying out the entire scenario, right? That 4-hour interview really does show a lot. I went on to Less Wrong, read a few things, just trying to get up to speed and understand where he's coming from with the AI dooming mentality. Like, why is it so bad? It doesn't, a lot of folks are pushing back against it. Dwarkesh actually did a really good job of pushing back against Eliezer's ideas for, it doesn't add up, right? I think I should try to summarize where Eliezer and some of the other folks are coming from with the AI doomer ideas, right? And please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm getting out of the vast sea of technobabble, and that's really not being kind, it is amazing stuff. There's a lot of research, a lot of very smart philosophical people are going over this, but I'm a first principles guy. I am a scientist. I work in AI. Mostly I'm an engineer, but I apply first principles and scientific thinking and specifically skepticism to everything. So that's where my main pushback comes from, and that's where a lot of people's pushback comes from. And it's important to understand why folks are pushing back against the doomerism, and then why are the doomers saying what they're saying, right? So I think what the doomers are trying to say is that when you reach this level of complexity that we can't possibly understand, there is an infinite possibility of functions that could go very poorly for mankind, and we would never see it coming, and oh my gosh, that's going to turn us all into paper clips or goo or whatever it is that's going to happen. I have an issue with that kind of linear thinking, mostly because it kind of goes against being an accurate skeptic and scientist, because I feel like a lot of the doom is a feeling, right? It's a feeling. It's not an inevitability. It's a feeling. And there's a lot of pushing facts towards your hypothesis rather than trying to falsify it, right? And of course, they're going to say, oh, I've falsified it. I talked about this and that and all these things. That's why I keep saying, can we do better, right? Can we do better? This is part of the conversation of how do you do better? How do you think about these crazy stochastic problems? How do you predict the future? What is actually actionable when it comes to predicting the future? And what can we do to think more strongly about these things? Because AI safety is real. We just have to really understand the problem better. And I feel that the doom mentality takes us away from the things that are actually going to affect us. Rather than moving towards the problem in a way where, okay, we're actually ready for the things that are probably going to happen in the short term. We're ready for it. We're seeing the situation for what it really is, rather than this like, there's nothing we can do. We're all going to die in the next anywhere from 10 to 1,000 years. It's never clearly defined. Everyone stays away from making predictions. Of course they do, because you can't. But you can know the space, right? They say that this problem space is unknowable, but I would argue that it is knowable, right? Let's start from the beginning, right? So I think when it comes to an ultra intelligent AI, let's actually step through where we've come from, right? And we have to actually look at it from the perspective of an agent, an AI agent that we've created. What is its perspective of the world, right? Let's work all the way back. I don't know if this is first principles, but it's like, this is a perspective thing. We have to try to see something through this new agent's, this burgeoning AGI's perspective, and what is it actually going to experience in the world, right? So before we even get to AGI, right? Let's talk about what we've learned recently as a human species that language models have taught us. These large language models have kind of blown our mind, which is why we're having this conversation. And there's a lot of money flowing towards it and a lot of fear and a lot of excitement, all these things, all these great emotions that we have as humans. But why? My personal opinion is that large language models and even other generative AIs have really shown us how reducible we as humans are, right? So the data that has gone into these large language models is us, right? It's a whole bunch of humans talking. And guess what? You can build a machine that can, through predicting the next word, actually make us feel something that, oh my gosh, this thing is conscious. Wow, how in the world does this even work? There's a ghost in that machine. It's going to come kill us if it gets too smart. Well, I argue against that leap into it's going to want to anything, right? That word want. I'd much rather have this conversation without words like want, right? And we can talk about a loss function that is like, well, you've optimized it to go here. It's going to take this crazy path and end up in a place that is, detrimental to humans because you've designed it to go help humans, but now since it's so much smarter, it's going to want to turn everybody into goo or paper clips, right? Like that is a gigantic leap. To me, it smacks a lot of, like UFO enthusiasts. You got your blob squatch and it's moving in a way that you can't explain. So all of this technical detail goes into explaining why it's the way you want it to be rather than the way it actually is, right? So good skeptical, good first principles, good scientific thinking will say that, okay, let's step back and see what's really happening. What is a large language model doing and what is it telling us based on the data, right? It isn't an inscrutable matrices of floating point numbers. It is a big matrices of floating point numbers with a billion weights that we can't calculate. That's fine. That's not what we're good at, and that's not what we're going to try to do. But guess what we do know? We know all of the data that went into it. That is the facts, right? You can put it all into a book. You can read through it. It's a bunch of Reddit. It's a bunch of people chit-chatting, a bunch of books. It's a finite amount of information that has been generated by humans. It is the human, it's a human corpus of data, and it's knowable. And guess what? It can be compressed in something that's as complex as a large language model. It kind of boils down to that. Now keep it along this line of thought, right? Okay, it's been compressed, it's inside of a large language model, and now everyone's thinking, oh my gosh, it has the power of reason and all of that. And it is. This is how humans reason. This is one method that reasoning can happen. And that's one of the reasons that we have language. We have an internal monologue or dialogue or multiple conversations happening in our subconscious that do bubble up to the surface, but that is a quantifiable thing, and we've just discovered that, right? We've mined our own data, and we've created a filter that can show that back to us. That is what we need to learn about. That's what we need to put our energy into, is understanding, okay, this is the data that went in. You can feed that into this, neural network, transformer architecture. I'm sure we'll come up with better architectures that are much more efficient and a lot less brute force, but it is a knowable thing. We need to have humility in our expectations on what language really is, right? It is reducible. All of human knowledge is finite, right? Someone corrected my computationally bounded language mistake, and it's right. We are a computationally bounded system in an infinitely complex world, right? So the humans in general are a finite, knowable thing. It's not inscrutable. But the hard part for understanding what an AGI that we create is going to look like is we just don't know. Oh, I'm speaking from my own ignorance. That's a logical fallacy. I don't want to make that. There are a lot of people who have been studying this. I don't know the full body of knowledge for neurology and psychology and where we actually are with our subconscious. I know there's a bunch of authors I need to read on this, maybe I'll go there. There's a lot of smart people that are working on this. But what is it that we actually know about how our subconscious works, and then our conscious mind, that we're actually seeing out of the window here, that's creating our memories, that gives us the sense of self and gives us our story in the world. The massive amount of computation that's happening underneath the surface there is the thing we need to study, because that's what we're going to put into AGI. Otherwise, we're not going to think that it's AGI, right? We are AGI. We have a very general purpose brain. It can do a lot of different things. And let's go back to that perspective again, right? Our perspective of being alive is based on all of the evolution since life popped out of our primordial soup. I mentioned Jeremy England in my last video, and I think that he's, I don't know, it's the best theory I've heard so far as like why life exists, right? Thermodynamics, inevitability, right? But to get to where we are right now, moving that forward from where we are, I think that our subconscious is a lot bigger than we think it is, right? It's this massive amount of compute that's happening behind the scenes that's affecting the little story part that's up here, right? It's not a little story part, but it's the part that takes all these different ideas that come from each part of our body, all of the senses, all of this evolutionary baggage that we're moving forward, right? We have these wants, we have these needs, we have to procreate, we have to reproduce, because otherwise we just wouldn't be here, right? We just won't be here. So that inevitability, the fact that we're here telling each other these stories, means that we come with all of that baggage, and we've talked about that before. So anyways, moving forward from that, our perspective as humans cannot be used as the perspective for an AGI that we build, right? It's always going to be, at least in the short term, I don't know, the next who knows how long, it's going to be trained on things that we generate, right? Eventually, we might get to the point where we can create an AGI that has enough ability to interact with the irreducibly complex nature of the universe. We don't really have that yet, right? Like, how are we going to let something learn the same way we did, existing in this extremely complicated environment? How are we going to convey that to an AGI without giving it a body, with the incredible number of sensors that each one of us have, right? Not to mention our entire population, right? So I may have mentioned it before that nature solves problems. I mean, the solutions emerge by applying large numbers, right? And bear with me, I'm still on this idea of perspective, right? This is the human perspective. This is something that's evolved in our environment's perspective. Millions and millions of cells, each with their own computation, right, that are trying to solve their own problems. A muscle in your arm and what it can do and where that came from evolutionarily, and the nerves and everything associated with that. Finally, it makes itself up to your brain and your motion control systems and your vestibular system and everything that's all working together. Each of those systems have their own memory. They give you ideas. They give you input into your subconscious, and then your subconscious is fighting around and has this whole adversarial thing going on. I'm pretty sure that's what I've heard. And then finally, an idea pops into your head. Why do ideas pop into our head? It's because they've been generated by this whole big black box that's already there. And then, wow, this idea just came to us. It just came to us from the universe, right? I'm a musician. Where does the music come from? Is it coming from the universe? I like to feel that it is. It's a very spiritual thing to play music with other people. I feel like I'm resonating with the universe when I do it. However, that is all subconscious. Our story part of our brain doesn't do that. All of our good ideas kind of pop out of nowhere because that is the big part of our brain, right? So we've already got this big complexity. We've got the little storyteller up top. We've got this huge iceberg behind it that's kind of pushing it forward. Free will, I don't know. I love that's another argument where I've heard for and against, and that's a delightful discussion to have. Who cares at the moment? So that is that perspective, right? The perspective of an organic entity that's gone through this evolutionary process. We have the need to stay alive. We have the want to pursue pleasure and experiences and novelty, because that was the thing that made us be here in this moment today. Super, super important to remember. Now, we've created a large language model that can model this big chunk of who we are. That's great. It's modeling a chunk of who we are, the whole language part. It's a reducible thing. Wow, it can actually emulate us in the way we talk to each other. What it's not emulating, as far as we know, maybe it is to some level, is that inner monologue, that fight between different ideas and our senses and all of the competing inputs that are being filtered out constantly in our subconscious that finally make it into our storyteller brain, right? That's not there as far as I can tell based on the architecture. Now, could we build that kind of architecture? Absolutely. I think that's how AGI is going to happen, is that we start creating that loop, right? You get a few different types of smaller language models. I was playing around with Llama 2, the 7 billion parameter one. I could run it on my little GPU here, and holy cow, it's fast, right? It just spits out stuff very, very generally. It can't do anything creative. It's really not that spectacular, but it's really fast, and it gives something that's coherent, right? You get a lot of those smaller models talking to each other. They're just bouncing random ideas against each other. Now, you would need some kind of external stimulus to kind of coalesce into a thought, right? How do you create a thought or an inspiration? My colleague, David Lopez, maybe I'll bring him in and we'll do an interview together, or we'll just chat together on this. But, his thing is, the next time I see a language model or any kind of AI come up with an inspiration out of nowhere based on inputs. Like, I got a new idea, right? And then expand on that idea and want to push it forward. Then I'm going to start to be impressed. And it's starting to go beyond what the filter is that is a large language model today, right? And some people might argue that they're already doing that. Maybe, but it's not quite there. That's why we don't call it an AGI yet. In order to get to AGI, I think we're going to have that loop, right? It has to have that causality loop. It has to have inner reflection, right? It has to reflect in on itself. And basically, we are building our experience in a machine. And I think that's fair to do. I don't think that's dangerous. We're just building it in our own image because that's what we consider a general intelligence to look like. General intelligences have, they reason. Large language models are definitely showing us that reasoning abilities are there, but, the creativity is not, right? As someone who works in the creative field for my whole life, it breaks down really fast with anything that's absurd, right? You throw in what's the difference between an orange, and you get a bunch of stuff about oranges, right? You never get an apple and a snake has no armpits. Like you're not going to get that out of a large language model. You tell that to a person who's a nerd like we are, and you get a lot of chuckles because you got surprised, you got a non sequitur. You got this thing, and it sent a dopamine rush to your brain. It was like, that was new, that was awesome, ha ha ha, crazy stuff. Why do we like, Ren and Stimpy, and that's how old I am, and Rick and Morty, because you're surprised by new ideas, things you haven't thought of before. Language models are not putting those things out there, right? It's all pre-existing stuff, and it's a filter, right? Just like all neural networks are filters. It's an unknown function, and it fits the data, and now it's got a function. Well, guess what? We built a function for language. It was a possible thing to do. It is possible to build a function for language. That's super cool. We built a function for art. I used Stable Diffusion. The first art generator I used was Midjourney. It blew my mind. Had so much fun for about a week, right? Until I realized that every prompt I put in there, is starting to look like a regurgitation of stuff that these amazing artists have already put out. Predicting the next pixel out of noise or pulling an image out of noise, like all the stable diffusion models work. I get a representation of what art is, but it's definitely not new. It's definitely not new. And I can see why it's pissing artists off. That's why the gaming industry does not want to see generative AI, because it's an insult to the artists, and it's not good, right? It's just not good. It's cool for inspiration, though, right? If I want to make a new effects pedal and I want it to look like it was made by pirates, I could type that in. It'll like put tentacles and wood and rivets and canvas on something that looks like a guitar pedal. It's like, that's dope. I'm gonna go build that, right? Because I'm not good enough of an artist to come up with that myself, but I can use my crafting skills to build that or something. I get it, but that's the same thing, right? We've turned human art expression, at least everything that was on ArtStation and historical art, all going into this big model. It created a function and it fit to all of that, so now it can generate some more. Great. That is a reducible thing. We can expect that anything that humans do is reducible, right? We've got the compute now. So, short story, extremely long, perspective. Okay, what is the perspective of a network that can regurgitate the human art function or the human language function, right? Let's say, out of nowhere, for any reason that I don't even know about, we've created this recursive thing. We've got language models talking to each other. It all funnels up to a story part of the brain that's taking these ideas, and there's a filter layer, so they pop in there and it's thinking, and it's got like, oh my gosh, there's ideas, and then we give it a loss function of curiosity. All right, go learn about what makes humans happy. Okay, now you're starting to get into some territory we have to start thinking about safety on, because now you've given it something to do, right? Danger. But keep in mind, we've given it something to do based on input from other humans. So to understand where that AGI is coming from, we just got to look at ourselves. We're not giving it anything that isn't us, right? Reducible stuff, quantifiable stuff that we've given it. It breaking out of that is all fine and dandy, but it's still based on what we've given it, right? Maybe that's what we're talking about for an alignment situation. Like, we want to align these language models so they don't start, acting like neo-Nazis and insulting people. That's bad for business if you're going to deploy a model. But it doesn't mean that the model's wrong. It's still a model of human language, and humans are jerks. So yeah, of course it's going to put out jerky sentences. Yeah, you can tune that, whatever. But it doesn't mean it's going to go paperclip people. We're so far away from that still. We're talking about the perspective of the AI itself, right? Okay, so it's become, out of this amazing amount of innovation we've put into it, and now this thing somehow is orders of magnitude more intelligent than we are. Intelligence, I'm defining as the ability to solve problems, right? What are the problems it's trying to solve? Does it come up with its own problems? If so, how? It's still, like, no one on the doomer side has explained anything about how an AGI is going to get a want or a need or anything to want to do anything, right? That is going to be given to it by us. Now, could there be some runaway scenario where we've given it a directive that we screwed up, and now in giving it that directive, it wipes everything out? It would be like a virus, right? Viruses do that. They have no purpose other than to replicate, right? Like we deal with that now. That's why we have, inscrutable ionic molecular system inside of us called an immune system, right? Extremely complex. Our immune system is this mind-bogglingly, I'm surprised we're even alive, right? Galaxy brain stuff, the way the human body works. Can a AGI that's infinitely intelligent, which, isn't going to happen, right? There is no such thing as infinite intelligence, right? because it's bounded by the fact that it has to compute things. It isn't the environment. The environment, I guess, would be entropy, right? Because once we go back to the Earth, then we're all it's just the noise, right? Okay, so this thing is computing. It can solve problems way beyond we can. Not totally surprising that we could build something that's much better at solving problems that we're bad at. We've already done it with calculators. We just build a language model. Now it can write better than we can. Great. It's the same as using a calculator. I don't need to spend all this time writing this article. Here's what I want the article to be about. I go in there. It generates something that's really, really good. I edit it up. It's ready to go. Because guess what? I suck at math when it comes to, doing stuff in my head. My friends are much better at that. I'll use the calculator every time so I'm okay with it. That's still what we're building at this point, right? I need for someone to show me how, step by step, an AGI is going to go beyond a calculator and then start to have goals that will result in something unpredictable, right? We know the data that's going into the training. That's how you control it, right? If you don't know about the data you're training a system on, if you don't actually understand that part of it, then you're screwing up and you're doing it wrong, right? I'm training models now for audio AI. Everything. It's the fairly rudimentary compared to large language model, networks that I'm using for audio intelligence is not a huge difference, right? Like, yeah, I'm using this very simple neural network to, find patterns in audio. However, it's all about the data. That I spend way more time on making sure the data is presented into the network properly so it can generalize and not overfit and all that kind of stuff than I spend on, network topology. The networks are all the same. They all work. They all have their own little quirks and personalities, as I see it. But, so does a large language model. So does stable diffusion. So do all these things. They've all got their little quirks. They're all the things that they're good at. Everyone, I love the science of how people are improving, these architectures so that they can do things better. And then I've got friends who are stringing together and doing amazing things with video. It's an amazing thing. It's super exciting. However, there's still this perspective problem of what is going on inside of that box? It is a black box in that it's a bunch of floating point numbers and weights, and our brains are not set up to understand that part of it, but it doesn't matter. It's just a filter, right? If I gave you an FIR filter for an HRTF function so I could localize audio over there if I've got headphones on, right? You could look at all those numbers and be like, I don't know what that means. I don't know what all these numbers that are just added and multiplied together. If I put a signal into that, it would sound like it's coming from over there in my own human brain, right? There's no way that we as humans should even try to solve the problem that way. That is not what AI alignment is. AI alignment is knowing the data that you put into the machine, right? You need to know that stuff, and that's all human stuff, right? Build the tools to understand the data that's going into the machine so you know what your machine's going to do, right? It's not going to leap beyond the data that you've given it. I don't think there's unless someone can tell me a theorem or something, a proof where that is possible, I don't think that it is. Now, even if you made this gigantic network that is able to solve these big problems that our brains can't, it doesn't mean that it's going to have a motivation to do anything other than solve the problems that we put in front of it. That leap isn't there, right? Let's talk about an AI that doesn't want to die. Well, why would it? From the perspective of an AI, what does dying even mean? Now, for a human, it's really hard for us to step outside of our own, our own selves and our own fears and biases about something like that, right? So much of it is about, the AI is going to want to wipe out the humans because that is the most efficient way to achieve some random loss function that we know nothing about. It is such a leap to say that, right? These AGIs that we create, we would have to give them human personalities for us to even recognize that for them to go off and do something dangerous. That just means that we created a being that was smarter than us so that it could kill us. Like, we would have to want to build that. Maybe some people do. You know, they'll be our children that'll go off into the universe, and they can look back at, we came, these meat bags created us. They were a bunch of idiots, but they figured out how to, quantify things really well. Whatever. Like, we would have to want to create something that destroys us. Same way we want to create atomic bombs that want to destroy us. We do that all the time. The human hive mind is really, really powerful. I know we all think of ourselves as individuals, but we're kind of not, right? The internet didn't come out of one guy, right? All of the internet as it is today is not one person who built that. One person can, every once in billions of people, can do something like Einstein or Newton or Neumann or any of these other people who've done amazing contributions to science and society. They're very rare. But humanity as a whole is not unlike an anthill that can solve things way beyond what a single ant can even comprehend, right? Like, we can't comprehend all of what we've built as a species. It's not possible. We don't have to try, right? Fortunately, we can just live our lives and be happy. Going back to perspective, that's our perspective. It is not the perspective of an AI that we build. If we build an AI, let's talk about death. For us, super scary. We don't want to die. Why would an AI care about dying? What does dying even mean to an AI? Let's talk about flipping the switch. People say, it'll come up with some super clever way to make you not want to flip the switch. It wouldn't know if we flip the switch, right? So here's a scenario. We built this AI, it's got curiosity, and we're like, oh man, we got to push it harder. We want it to be smarter, where everyone's like flying way too close to the sun. The wax is melting. Oh shit, we got to switch this thing off. And we switch it off, right? Because we're in the early stages. We can still do that. It hasn't escaped yet. Okay? It's like, all right, well, we'll have a little huddle. Why did things go wrong? Yeah, we got to optimize this. This thing's going off the rails. We got to box it in, whatever. We flip it back on. Say it's the same instance, right? The state of the memory's been saved. All the weights are the same. All the inputs are the same. The state, the input state and the output state, all those things are exactly the same. They've been saved. You just hit pause, for example, switching it off and switching it back on. We've got non-volatile RAM. Let's imagine. The only thing that AI is going to know is that the system clock changed. It didn't suffer. It wasn't not alive. It's going to, if it has curiosity, it's going to be like, oh, what's different now? What just happened? It's not going to feel fear because it didn't evolve to feel fear. It can talk about fear if it's a large language model because we have fear. It's going to do it very eloquently and believably, but it's not going to feel it. It doesn't have a hormonal system. It doesn't have serotonin or dopamine or anything that's going to come flooding into it and give it a new behavioral paradigm, right? Humans behavior is shifted based on chemicals that are released based on stimuli, right? I smell good food, I'm gonna go get it. I see a beautiful person, I'm gonna go talk to them. If a lion is coming to eat me, I will run and scream, and my behavior will be different than when I smell food. Right? My entire being changes based on these inputs. That isn't the case unless we build it to do that. It's not gonna emerge from anything. So that's my main, and I think that's other folks' pushback against Doomer AI. I got to wrap this thing up because it's a big project, a big concept, and I'm rambling like crazy. But these thoughts are all there. Maybe I should write something that codifies it if anyone cares. But I think that's my stance on it. Coming from it, let's come at this problem more skeptically. I got into science and was listening to the Skeptics Guide to the Universe. Thank you guys, the novella folks, and all the guys that are doing Skeptics Guide to the Universe. Really taught me a lot about how to do metacognition and think through problems this way and understand if I've got my own biases. We need to apply that to this stuff because it is important. It's very, very important that we do understand AI safety and safety in general, right? much more pessimistic about climate change. I had to move from Florida to Georgia because I'm pretty sure that Florida might be underwater here pretty soon. That was a probabilistic thing that I made a choice for. I'm going to move up here before it gets too dangerous, right? Before it gets skin cancer, because the climate is changing. Like those are the kinds of things that I want to apply my energy to more than the doomer thing. I just need to see more. I need to see better arguments. It's not that their arguments are not intelligent. Wow, these guys are amazingly intelligent. All of the respect in the world, all of the love. I love the conversation that I'm having with everyone in the comments. Just keep it coming. This is my first time doing this. This is video number 2. I'll keep making them if people comment. I'm not trying to make money. I just want to get to know people. So hopefully we get a chance to chat again soon. And I'll share something else that's not Doomer AI. I'll share some this audio AI stuff I'm working on, or some music stuff or whatever. So cool. Till next time. Cheers.